You just confessed to the wrong man.
My wife, Sarah, staggered into the house after some corporate retreat in Chicago, drunk out of her mind and dripping with smug pride. She tossed her pricey leather bag by the stairs like she owned the place and, without the slightest build-up, announced, "I've been sleeping with my boss." No warning, no hint of guilt, no hesitation. Just a cold, matter-of-fact confession, as if she'd been waiting to savor the delivery. She looked almost thrilled with herself, like she'd just landed some prize or unlocked a new level in life. She slipped off one designer heel, left the other dangling for effect, and laughed to herself as if I wasn't even allowed in on the punchline. The sheer nerve was staggering. She detonated our 12-year marriage with the same casual voice most people use to ask if we're out of milk. No tears, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the wreckage she'd just caused. Only arrogance wrapped up in an overpriced outfit from a trip she hadn't even planned in our shared calendar. I'd seen the signs for months, maybe longer if I'm being honest. Odd late-night meetings that left her makeup smeared, expense reports from restaurants nowhere near a client's office, stories that never lined up when I pushed her, business trips that vanished from our calendar without explanation. She grew secretive, locking her phone, changing passwords, whispering on calls, and suddenly buying lingerie that was clearly never meant for me. But hearing her say it out loud with that cruel indifference was another level entirely. Most people would have screamed, thrown things, or broken down. Instead, I stayed perfectly still and slid a sealed manila envelope into the middle of the dining table. She didn't even notice. She was too busy uncorking an expensive bottle of Malbec, sipping like this was her moment of freedom and truth. As she helped herself to wine and behaved as though she'd just commented on mundane weather patterns, I activated my laptop, the same machine I'd purchased for her last Christmas with the inscription "Build Your Dreams" engraved on the back, and executed a send command on correspondence I'd been meticulously constructing for months. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me, utilizing the very technology I'd given her out of love to orchestrate her complete professional annihilation. You see, Sarah had overlooked a crucial detail about our relationship dynamic and my professional capabilities. Before transforming into the domestic partner who prepared gourmet meals and meticulously organized her financial documentation, I was a highly regarded professional communication consultant specializing in executive presentations and corporate crisis management. I'd dedicated over a decade developing presentations for Fortune 500 C-suite executives, including her superior Marcus, whom I'd actually met at several company social functions over the years. I understood their precise language patterns, their psychological manipulation frameworks, and most critically, how their organization's complex digital infrastructure operated at every level. More importantly, I knew every policy, every regulatory loophole, every compliance requirement they thought nobody outside their inner circle was monitoring. I'd ghostwritten speeches for their CEO, crafted damage control statements for their PR disasters, and helped structure their internal communication protocols. They'd essentially handed me the keys to their kingdom years ago without realizing the potential consequences. The message I transmitted was a comprehensive keynote presentation disguised as strategic corporate philosophy, impeccably structured, using their proprietary templates, expertly composed in Sarah's distinctive rhetorical style, distributed through her authenticated corporate email system. She'd remained logged in on our shared iPad for over 6 months. Cybersecurity was never her strongest attribute. The opening segments perfectly mimicked her standard professional rhetoric about organizational values, executive leadership principles, and moral standards in modern business. Textbook corporate material that could have been extracted from any of her previous conference presentations or leadership seminars. However, at precisely the midpoint, everything transformed with surgical precision. Abruptly, incredibly specific information emerged regarding promotional misconduct, systematically fabricated business events, and highly suspicious financial transactions that violated multiple federal regulations. Individual identities were carefully redacted using their standard legal formatting, but the chronological timeline aligned flawlessly with Sarah and Marcus's 18-month romantic entanglement. Every supposed client consultation that was actually an intimate rendezvous at expensive hotels, every professional conference that was genuinely a romantic vacation disguised as business development, every late-night strategy session that involved champagne room service and spa treatments charged to corporate accounts. I transcended mere allegations and incorporated irrefutable, verifiable evidence, embedded hyperlinks to digitized financial documents, captured screenshots of private text conversations, accommodation reservations that directly contradicted official travel itineraries submitted to HR. Everything was concealed within the presentation's technical metadata, programmed to monitor access patterns, track individual engagement metrics, and create digital forensic trails. I even included booking confirmations for couples massages, romantic dinner reservations, and luxury spa treatments, all fraudulently charged to company expense accounts under fictitious client entertainment categories. The presentation contained embedded tracking pixels that would alert me whenever someone opened specific sections, how long they spent reading particular slides, and whether they forwarded the document to additional recipients. It was a masterpiece of digital surveillance disguised as corporate communication. The entire presentation was programmed for automatic distribution to 12 board members, 4 external partners, 2 investigative journalists I'd researched who specialized in corporate fraud, and 3 regulatory compliance officers at precisely 9 a.m. the following Monday morning. What appeared to be Sarah's voluntary confession would simultaneously arrive in dozens of inboxes belonging to people with the authority to destroy careers. Sarah never examined the envelope strategically positioned on our dining table. Had she investigated its contents, she would have discovered physical copies of everything that was about to be distributed digitally. Printed screenshots of their private messages discussing how to hide expense receipts, fraudulent travel documentation, accommodation confirmations she insisted were non-existent, lift receipts from locations she claimed never to have visited during supposed client meetings. But she was too consumed with congratulating herself on her radical transparency and authentic communication to acknowledge my conspicuously calm response. She wandered upstairs humming some off-key Taylor Swift melody, leaving her designer heels scattered across our hardwood floor like evidence at a crime scene nobody had discovered yet. I could hear her in the shower, still humming that same tune like she'd gotten away with the perfect crime instead of confessing to it. That entire Sunday evening, she maintained her routine as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Prepared her usual chia seed breakfast, criticized expired almond milk with passive-aggressive commentary about grocery shopping responsibilities, engaged in completely standard weekend behavior. She had this insufferable casual arrogance, like she expected me to either explode in stereotypical jealous rage or quietly accept my designated role as the emotionally stunted, betrayed husband who couldn't satisfy his ambitious wife's sophisticated needs. She remained completely unaware that within approximately 14 hours, her entire professional existence would catastrophically collapse in ways she couldn't imagine. I spent the evening outside meticulously trimming hedges and pretending to care about landscaping aesthetics, while internally counting down the minutes until systematic detonation of everything she'd worked to achieve. Monday morning at exactly 8:02 a.m., my phone erupted with an incoming call. Marcus, completely panicked and audibly hyperventilating through the receiver. He'd reviewed the presentation draft during his usual early morning email review and was experiencing what sounded like a complete psychological breakdown. The technical metadata definitively confirmed origination from Sarah's authenticated company account with full executive-level privileges. He assumed she'd suffered some kind of mental health crisis and was attempting to destroy both their careers in some twisted homicide self-destruction scenario. "Who the hell authored this document?" he screamed through the phone with genuine terror in his voice. "What is the meaning of this concluding section? Where did this information come from? Who else did you send this to? This can't be real." I could hear his administrative assistant in the background asking about his scheduled 8:15 call with the PR leadership team. He snapped at her to reschedule everything immediately and hold all his appointments until further notice. The panic in his voice was absolutely intoxicating. Months of calculated preparation crystallizing into pure, undiluted fear. I calmly informed him the material was scheduled for widespread automated release at noon, unless manually intercepted through the proper administrative channels he no longer controlled. Then I terminated the call without additional explanation and returned to drinking my morning coffee while observing the neighbor's dog bark at squirrels like they represented personal existential threats. By 9 a.m., absolute pandemonium had consumed their entire organization's executive level. The presentation had already been accessed by 6 board members and 2 external advisory consultants who'd forwarded it to legal departments with urgent priority flags, Someone in corporate communications was frantically managing incoming inquiries from financial backers and institutional investors questioning whether this document represented satirical content, legal testimony, or actionable intelligence. The Regulatory Compliance Division had initiated comprehensive audit procedures spanning the previous 24 months of executive travel and expense reporting. 2 assistant vice presidents and a senior partner who'd harbored professional resentment toward Marcus for years had already forwarded copies to additional stakeholders with commentary expressing serious concerns about ethical violations and potential regulatory exposure. The document was spreading through their professional network like a malignant virus, infecting every level of corporate hierarchy. Sarah eventually examined the manila envelope at approximately 11:30 a.m. when she began receiving increasingly desperate communications from Marcus, the legal department, and several board members requesting immediate clarification about her strategic communications initiative. At that point, any possibility of damage control or narrative management had become completely impossible. Every communication platform we'd previously shared, telephone services, electronic mail, social media accounts, professional networking sites, had been systematically blocked with automated responses directing all inquiries to my recently retained legal representation. She tried calling my personal number, my work line, even attempted to reach me through LinkedIn messaging, but I deleted my entire professional profile that morning. Complete digital silence where our shared communication channels once existed. The realization that she was completely cut off from any possibility of explanation, manipulation, or damage control must have been terrifying. The most elegant aspect of this entire operation was my collaborative assistance from an unexpected source. My university roommate Derek had been employed in their public relations division for over 3 years and had recently received a discreet promotion to strategic brand integrity oversight, a completely fictitious position I'd helped him create that provided unrestricted server administrator access to their internal communication systems. Derek and I had previously operated a consulting partnership called Heritage Communications Solutions during our early careers, specializing in crisis management and strategic messaging for emerging corporations. When I activated that historical favor, specifically reminding him about a significant academic scandal I'd helped him navigate during our senior year that could have destroyed his scholarship and future career prospects, he facilitated my utilization of their own technological infrastructure against them. 12 years later, he was finally in position to cash in that debt with substantial interest, and he executed his role with remarkable precision. Derek had never forgotten how I'd fabricated an entire research project to cover his plagiarism charges, written multiple appeal letters, and personally vouched for his character to university administration. That intervention had saved his academic career and made his current position possible. When I explained what Sarah and Marcus had done to our marriage and asked for his technical assistance, he didn't hesitate. Sarah was summoned to an emergency board assembly that afternoon in the executive conference room, typically reserved for merger negotiations and crisis management. No comfortable seating arrangements, no catered refreshments, no pleasantries whatsoever. Simply 3 stone-faced corporate officers positioned across from her, like a tribunal presenting one straightforward, legally precise inquiry. Did you formally disclose your romantic involvement with your direct supervisor during your advancement evaluation period, as required by federal regulatory compliance and company policy? She attempted to minimize everything with her usual manipulation tactics, insisting the relationship wasn't substantial or exclusive, claiming they were just casual dinner companions, and the physical component was brief and insignificant. But the executives possessed comprehensive documentation for every single transgression spanning 18 months. 6 hotel reservation transactions, 12 fictitious client meals with detailed expense reports, all personally authorized by Marcus using his executive override privileges. The evidence included lift receipts from residential addresses nowhere near legitimate business locations, dinner bills showing 2 entrees with no booze purchases because they'd brought their own wine to avoid detection, spa treatment bookings disguised as client entertainment, and hotel stays at luxury resorts with no conference facilities whatsoever. The company's disclosure regulations were legally unambiguous. Any romantic relationships between subordinates and supervisors must be formally declared prior to promotional consideration to avoid conflicts of interest and regulatory violations. She executed a voluntary suspension agreement to prevent immediate termination for cause, which would have triggered additional legal complications. Marcus was simultaneously placed on administrative leave pending formal internal investigation and potential criminal referral to federal authorities. By Tuesday morning, 2 primary institutional investors had completely withdrawn their financial support, citing leadership integrity concerns and potential regulatory exposure. By Thursday afternoon, both Sarah and Marcus were officially terminated for policy violations, immediately forfeiting all separation benefits, stock options, pension contributions, and future equity compensation. The board had uncovered systematic patterns of falsified regulatory documentation and human resources violations, extending over 14 months of systematic fraud. What initially appeared to be a straightforward infidelity situation had metastasized into a comprehensive audit revealing expense account embezzlement, policy circumvention, securities violations, and potential mail fraud charges. The scope of their misconduct was staggering even to investigators experienced with corporate corruption. The ultimate, ironic revelation came 2 weeks later. The same community institution where I'd previously conducted professional writing workshops specifically requested my services to develop their updated ethical guidelines and compliance training materials. Sarah's former organization also contracted me, with Derek's enthusiastic internal recommendation, to completely restructure their internal communication protocols and design fraud prevention systems. They actually issued me a substantial bonus check for inadvertently uncovering significant compliance violations that saved the company millions in regulatory fines and civil liability. The irony was so perfectly orchestrated, it felt like divine justice rather than human calculation. She currently remains completely unemployed, professionally ostracized within her entire industry, and confronting multiple civil litigation proceedings from investors who sustained significant financial losses due to the stock price collapse following the scandal. Her professional reputation is so thoroughly destroyed that she can't secure interviews in adjacent industries or even entry-level positions in completely unrelated fields. Marcus experienced even more severe consequences. His professional credentials were permanently revoked. He's facing federal investigation for securities fraud and mail fraud, and 3 different state regulatory agencies have initiated their own proceedings. Those fabricated business conferences weren't merely about concealing their affair. They had systematically embezzled company funds through fraudulent travel expenses, fake vendor invoices, and fictitious client entertainment charges. My meticulously crafted keynote presentation had essentially become the foundational document for a much larger federal investigation into systematic corporate fraud, extending far beyond their personal misconduct. The FBI's white-collar crime division subpoenaed company records spanning 3 years and discovered patterns of fraudulent expense reporting involving multiple executives. I never elevated my voice, never directly confronted either individual, never initiated divorce proceedings initially. I simply leveraged their own documentation, their own technological infrastructure, and their own pathological arrogance against them with surgical precision. Sometimes, optimal vengeance isn't emotional outbursts or dramatic confrontations. It's strategic calculation executed with methodical patience over months of careful preparation. The manila envelope Sarah ultimately opened contained one handwritten message in my distinctive penmanship. If this situation truly isn't significant, why the elaborate concealment and systematic deception? She attempted contacting me subsequently through every available channel, pleading for dialogue opportunities, guaranteeing she could repair everything through counseling and renewed commitment to our marriage. She tried apologizing, minimizing the significance, explaining her psychological motivations, rationalizing her choices as temporary confusion, every manipulation technique in her extensively developed repertoire. But nothing remained salvageable because the foundation of trust had been completely obliterated. I had already progressed forward both geographically and psychologically, relocating to a downtown apartment and establishing new professional relationships built on honesty rather than deception. Sometimes strategic quietude communicates more effectively than emotional shouting, and methodical patience consistently surpasses impulsive reactions when seeking genuine justice. Update for those requesting additional details. Divorce papers were officially filed last month after consultation with a specialist attorney who handles high-asset dissolutions involving fraud. Sarah is representing herself because she can't afford competent legal counsel anymore. Her liquid assets were frozen during the federal investigation, and no attorney wants association with someone under criminal investigation for corporate fraud. The marital home is being sold, and I'm retaining most of the proceeds since I successfully proved she violated our comprehensive prenuptial agreement through documented infidelity and financial misconduct. She's currently living with her elderly parents in their basement and working part-time retail positions, while facing potential criminal charges for expense account fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit securities violations. Marcus lost his professional license permanently and is facing federal prosecution for securities fraud with potential prison sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The fabricated business conferences weren't just about hiding their romantic affair. They had systematically embezzled over $400,000 in company funds through fraudulent travel expenses, fake vendor invoices, and completely fictitious client entertainment charges spanning nearly 2 years. He's retained 3 different criminal defense attorneys, liquidated his entire retirement portfolio to pay legal fees, and his wife immediately filed for divorce while relocating their children to another state to avoid media attention. His professional network completely abandoned him. Nobody wants association with someone under federal indictment for white-collar crimes. The company promoted Derek to permanent strategic communications director with a substantial salary increase and additional stock options. They've also requested my consulting services on 3 additional internal investigations where they suspect similar misconduct patterns. Apparently, my inadvertent discovery of their compliance violations saved them an estimated $12 million in regulatory fines, civil liability, and institutional investor lawsuits. Sarah has attempted reaching out through mutual friends, family members, even showed up at my apartment building asking security personnel to facilitate communication. She's desperately attempting to paint herself as the sufferer of a controlling, vindictive husband who couldn't handle his wife's professional success and personal autonomy. But the documented evidence speaks louder than her revisionist sob story, and every mutual acquaintance who's reviewed the comprehensive evidence has completely severed contact with her. The most satisfying aspect of this entire situation is that the community college where I now teach advanced writing seminars specifically requested that I develop a case study about corporate ethics violations for their business administration program. I use Sarah and Marcus's situation as the primary example, obviously with names changed for legal protection, and my students are absolutely fascinated by how quickly professional reputations can crumble when built on systematic deception rather than legitimate merit. Marcus's ex-wife received full custody of their children and a substantial settlement that included most of his remaining assets before the federal seizure. She took the kids and moved across the country to start fresh without the stigma of his criminal behavior. His extended family has publicly distanced themselves, and he went from earning mid-6 figures annually to working part-time construction for his brother while awaiting federal trial. The federal prosecutors expressed particular interest in the comprehensive documentation my keynote presentation inadvertently provided. They've subpoenaed company records spanning 4 years and discovered systematic patterns of fraudulent expense reporting involving at least 6 other executives who thought they were cleverly gaming the system. My single presentation essentially triggered the largest corporate fraud investigation in the company's history. What started as personal revenge against an unfaithful spouse evolved into exposing systematic corporate corruption that had been operating undetected for years. The ripple effects continue expanding as additional sufferers come forward and investigators uncover deeper layers of misconduct. Sometimes karma requires assistance, and sometimes that assistance arrives in the form of a perfectly crafted PowerPoint presentation delivered through someone's own digital infrastructure with devastating precision. The beautiful aspect of using their own systems against them was that every step remained completely legal. I never hacked anything, never stole information, never violated any federal or state laws. I simply used legitimate access they'd freely provided and information they'd carelessly left available on shared devices. The woman I once thought I'd spend my life with is now a cautionary tale about professional integrity and personal character. The man she chose over our marriage is facing federal charges with potential decades in prison. Justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's methodical, patient, and delivered with surgical precision through their own corporate email systems, while they're too arrogant to recognize the trap being constructed around them. The federal investigation expanded beyond anything I imagined possible. They discovered the fake conference scheme involved dozens of executives across multiple departments. The company now faces shareholder lawsuits and SEC investigation for securities fraud. My consulting business has grown significantly. I have contracts with several Fortune 500 companies to audit communication systems and develop fraud prevention protocols. Derek and I are discussing launching a formal consulting firm specializing in corporate ethics. Last month, Sarah sent a 12-page handwritten letter with desperate apologies and reconciliation pleas. I shredded it. Some bridges can never be rebuilt. Her sister Emma approached me at a coffee shop, apologizing for Sarah's behavior and revealing this was a lifelong pattern. She'd cheated in previous relationships, too. Emma thanked me for finally holding her accountable after decades of family enabling. My new life is remarkably peaceful. I wake up without wondering what lies I'll discover. I'm dating again. Nothing serious, but it's refreshing interacting with honest people who communicate directly. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah thinks about that envelope she ignored while celebrating her honesty. If she'd opened it and chosen genuine conversation instead of arrogant wine pouring, none of this would have happened. But that required humility and respect, qualities she'd discarded long before her confession. The woman who mocked me as too quiet learned that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And patience isn't passivity. It's preparation for effective action.